meeting is being recorded.
Okay. All right. That's great. Well, look, good afternoon, everybody from the UK, and good morning to those of you that have come in from the States. I think the format is going to be similar to the conversation that we had with Pat Hall in Beckley in November 22, the thing that Ryan and I did. So it's going to be very much on that basis. There's no formal presentation at the moment from Chris. Most of you will recall that Chris was due to talk to us last May, but unfortunately he got a really nasty tooth abscess, which completely, took him out of action. But I'm delighted to say that he is fighting fit now. I think perhaps I can just give you the context. I know there was a bit of pre-chat when I was trying to get my internet up and running properly, but let me give you the context of how I met Chris. We've become quite friendly over the last few years. I actually met Chris at the Kappa conference in Dallas in 2019. It was the first formal event I'd been to in Dallas. It was at the Marriott Hotel, which is southeast of Dealey Plaza. It's near the Dallas Morning News building. Great views of, we were in the top floor, great views of west end of Dallas, and incredible views across the Trinity River to Oak Cliff, where all the shenanigans went on. And it was during one of the breaks, I left the sort of the ballroom, the conference room, and outside is a concourse where there were many merchants selling their wares, including Chris. And I came across Chris, and at the time I'd never seen so many books on the Kennedy assassination and Kennedy's life and other paraphernalia and memorabilia. And he was there with his wife, Sharon, and I went up to speak to him, and I was really looking for some stuff that wasn't mainstream conspiracy books, stuff where people had taken a deep dive or people had a different perspective on the assassination. And I didn't want any crap, like Mortal Error or anything from from the Lone Nut camp. And Chris was really, really helpful in he may have had an overt agenda, but he was very helpful. And I left with many books, and that cost me tens and tens and tens of dollars, and Life magazines and newspapers and photographs, and it was a great job done by all. But it was during those conversations that I discovered that Chris ran this symposium, which he'd been doing for a few years, down in Mansfield, which is about 40 minutes south of Dallas. And it's a somewhat exclusive event, in fact, because it was by invitation only. And very much a friendly, sort of intimate affair. I didn't know at the time. I'd met Ryan actually at registration, and we got talking and got to know each other and kind of clicked. But I didn't know that Ryan was very friendly with Chris as well, and it all kind of all worked out going down to Mansfield on that day. And I must say, if any of you haven't been to Dallas and you are considering going around the conference season, I would highly recommend the Chris's Symposium. It's actually moved to Fort Worth now for the last couple of years post-COVID. It's been at Fort Worth, but it really is, I think, better than the sort of the flagship conferences, quite frankly, which is a bit of a merry-go-round, one could argue. With Chris's events, I think I heard him say earlier on that he chooses the kind of agenda that he would want to have at a conference. And the good news is that there are no lunatic speakers at Chris's event, and then there's no Rob Morrows that are going to stand up and shout and scream and so forth, and be adversarial. And it really does give you an opportunity to sit down and really speak, with some high caliber researchers and authors. And I know Scott has been going to it for many, many years. And I would absolutely thoroughly recommend it. Chris has become now a DPUK friend. He is considering joining us, I believe. And there was a few of us that went to Dallas this year, and he met some others, from the society. So with respect to today's event, Chris, I think we need to start, in an obvious place, and that is how did you get into that? It's the sort of questions that we ask all of our guests. And I know obviously you started in the sort of late 80s, so you've been involved in this for multiple decades. So if you can sort of just spend some time taking us on your research, journey over the decades, and the people that you've met, the researchers, your mentors, some of the witnesses. I mean, being there gives you such a competitive advantage to us lot, over on the other side of the pond. And what you're working on now, what kind of research areas you're working on now. And perhaps you can also touch on your career, because I think also that has had some influence into some of the areas that you've looked into where you think you've got a competitive advantage. And just before you start this, I wanted to ask you how Sharon is, because there's quite a few of us that know Sharon, and obviously she had that terrible accident. And if you could just give us an update on how she is, please.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, thank you all for having me on here. I really appreciate it. I was reflecting and talking to my wife, Sharon, that, when I first started out, it was kind of cool how the internet was just kind of first coming on age, and not everybody had email. So we still had to kind of write letters and, drop postcards and things like that. And now we can jump on a computer and talk across the pond, which I think is a pretty cool advantage that, great tool that we all have in our toolbox, so to speak. But yeah, my wife, Sharon, a lot of you guys know Sharon, or if you've been online or whatever, you've probably heard me talk about her. We are coming up on our 10-year anniversary. And February we'll be together for 12 years. 2 years ago, Sharon tripped and fell and broke her femur and broke her left hand. So she has been kind of incapacitated on crutches through rehab and stuff ever since. We have found out that since then, she also suffered a traumatic brain injury and some spinal injuries. And she's also going to have a complete and total knee replacement. So, we've got about another year and a half of crutches and rehab and stuff ahead of us. But I do appreciate you guys, those of you who know Sharon, always asking about her and saying, hey, tell her hi, tell her this. Trust me, it means a lot to her. It means a lot to me as well. So I appreciate that. But thanks for asking, Neil. Thanks for giving me that chance. But yeah, so kind of to get started, like Neil said, my name is Chris Gallop. I live in Burleson, Texas, which is about 45 minutes south of Dallas. So kind of grew up around the Dallas area. My mother lived in Dallas for short time, or quite a while. She went through grade school and high school in Dallas, and then she met my dad and then moved just south of there. Going back to before I kind of I want to touch on something. Neil said that we would not have at my luncheon, we don't have any like Robert Morrow's or anything like that. And I will say that Robert has come to a couple of my luncheons, and he has, in true Robert fashion, tried to stand up and take over. And if you guys know of Gary Shaw, he's a sweet, nice, fatherly figure, at least he is to me. If you want to see him upset, have Robert Morrow come to a luncheon and try to take over. I have never seen that little man get up and basically look at Robert and say, "You can leave now." So that was quite cool. I do have that on DVD.
That was just an example, because I had absolutely no idea he'd ever been to one of your symposiums. But I've seen him stand up at these other conferences, and I find it embarrassing, to be honest with you.
Yeah, he did that once, and he's been to a couple of other of my luncheons, and he has sat there with hat in hand. So I think for once he learned his lesson. But getting back to my journey, being this close to Dallas, I've always been interested in the Kennedy assassination. It's always been in and around my life. You know, growing up just south of here, both sets of grandparents, they saved the newspapers, they saved the Life magazines, and so you know, I always knew about it, and I read a lot about it. You know, what I could and what I could understand. You know, as a kid. And one of the requirements, once I got into high school, my senior year in high school in 1987, 88, was we had to write a senior English research paper in order to graduate. And I knew going into it that I was going to write on the Kennedy assassination. And so I presented that to my teacher, and she's like, "No, you know, I now you have to pick something else." And I'm like, "No, you said we could write on whatever we wanted to." She said, "Well, it's been done. It's been written. There's nothing new that you can bring to me." And of course, me being a young, cocky 17-year-old kid, I went, "Hey, what if I can bring you new evidence, new ideals, and new questions? Would you let me write on it then?" And she said, "Yeah, if you can do that." So I was feeling pretty good at myself, and till I got home, and then I sat down and I went, "Oh, what the hell did I just do?" Because I didn't know it. You know, I knew what I'd read, and so my aunt said, "Well, there's a guy that lives here in Cleburne, my hometown at the time, that has written a book on the assassination. Why don't you give him a call?" And so I looked him up in the phone book and called Gary Shaw, and he answered the phone. And I said, "Gary," I said, "my name's Chris Gallop." I said, "I'm a senior at Cleburne High School." I said, "I need to write a paper on the Kennedy assassination, and I need your help." And he said, "Okay, well, come on down on Monday." And so he was had an architect's office at the time, so I went down there, and we've been friends, and he's been a mentor, and he's been a second father to me ever since. And first met him, excuse me, first met him, and he asked me a question. He said, "Are you in it for the truth, or are you in it for a grade?" And I kind of looked at him. I said, "Well, Gary," I said, "I need to graduate." I said, "But I also need to, you know, I also want to find out the truth." And he looked at me, he said, "Okay, come on." And so with my research paper, he gave me names of people like Michael Mertz, Jean Rene Swetra, a gentleman by the name of Roger Tittle. And all of these were kind of new and not yet well-known names. So I put all those in my paper. And at the time in Texas, I was the first class to graduate under the no pass, no play. Basically, what that means is 70, a score of 70 is passing. And if you don't do that, you can't participate like in extracurriculars like football or, you know, whatever. And she reads my research paper. We get it all back, and I'm feeling pretty good about myself. And she gives me a 69 on it.
No.
Yes, she gives me a 69. 70 is passing, so she gives me a 69. And at the bottom, she writes in big red letters, she goes, "You raised more questions than you answered." And I was like, well, that's kind of the goal, isn't it? So take it to Gary. You know, Gary kind of switches to that fatherly figure. He consoles me, and he's like, "Well, you know, people don't understand. They, you know, they don't get it. They don't, you know, it's fine. Don't worry about it. You know, it's okay." And then we really didn't talk about my paper any other time. So fast forward to November that year. That was the 25th anniversary. first time I'd really gone to an organized Dealey Plaza event. And so I go there, and we're at the Ask conference, which is the predecessor to the Lancer conferences and all the other conferences. And Gary gets up there, and Gary's talking, and he, I think he had about an hour that he was allotted. And on this panel that I'm sitting in front of, we have Marina Oswald, we have Janine DeMoreschilt, George DeMoreschilt's widow. We have Gary Shaw, Larry Harris, Larry Howard. We have Mary Farrell, and numerous other, big name witnesses, researchers, things like that. We had Gene Hill. And so I'm just like, I'm in awe just listening to everybody. And Gary goes, well, I'm going to cut my presentation short. He goes, we have a new researcher. I kind of want to give him some time to sit up and talk and maybe answer some questions. And well, I kind of sit up on the edge of my seat. And I'm like, man, we're going to get to hear from somebody else. Gary said he's never spoken in public before. And I was like, man, this is going to be great. I'm here at the right time. And Gary goes, well, he goes, well, I'm just going to go ahead and bring him up, and I'll tell you a little bit about him. He goes, Chris, why don't you come on up? This is Chris Gallop. And I went, what? Me? And you got to remember, I'm an 18-year-old kid. I've never spoken in public before in my life. Okay. And so I go up there and I read my research paper, and I mentioned George DeMoreschilt, knowing that his wife is sitting behind me. And I mentioned Lee Harvey Oswald, knowing that Marina Oswald was sitting right behind me. And so it was a surreal experience to read that in front of 500 people.
Well, I bet it was.
Yeah, yeah. And so at the end of it, Gary gets back up and he goes, well, what do y'all think he made on this paper? And, everybody's kind of, made an A plus, B plus, A minus. And Gary gets up and he goes, well, no, he failed it. And he goes, however, I've made copies, and this is the beauty of Gary Shaw. He goes, I've made copies. He goes, Chris will be sitting down here and selling them for $10 a piece, and he'll be more than happy to autograph them. Okay. Here I am with Gene Hill and Gary Shaw and all these other people, and he wants me to sell my research paper and autograph it. Again, a surreal experience. So it's pretty cool, but I say all that to say that when I started this, Gary took me under his wing. And even today, like I said before, he is a mentor. He is a great, great friend. And he's like a second father to me. We talk more than just the case now. We always have, but it's basically now that I've gotten older and kind of experienced life more, so to speak. So I would not be here if it wasn't for him. I blame him for this every day, and he gladly accepts the blame. So if any of you who have met Gary, you know the fun-loving guy that he is. So I would not take anything for my relationship with that man. But through Gary, I've gotten to meet so many people. So many people that aren't with us anymore. Got to meet Penn Jones. Got to know him really well. Matter of fact, when I first met Penn, he shook my hand and he said, well, your generation, you're going to solve this damn case. He said, we're just laying the groundwork for you. I didn't really quite know what he meant by that, but now I catch myself telling the younger generation, hey, your generation's going to solve this. We're just laying the groundwork for you. So, but yeah, guys, I've been around for quite a while, and I've gotten an opportunity to meet so many people. blessed to meet so many people. Some of my favorites, like I said, were Penn Jones, Larry Ray Harris, great guy. Life cut way too short. Let's see, who else was my favorites? Jim Mars, funny guy, great guy. Golly, I can't even think now.
Mary Farrell.
Who?
Mary Farrell.
Oh yeah. Mary was great. Mary was the type of person that you could pick up the phone, and it didn't matter if she was in a full interview or if she was having tea with some friends. If you called her, she would answer the phone. How can I help you? Well, sweetie, you tell me what you want, what you need. Okay, I'll hang on. I'll go get it. And she would stop what she was doing, and she would go pull a book or pull a paper or whatever, and she would, copy it or fax it or do whatever you needed right then and there. And she was a wonderful resource, and I'm so glad that we have her, basically her archives on online for people to access. So, Nancy, you said you bought one of my papers? Wow, that's surreal.
That's Nancy. That's worth about $400,000 now. That paper.
Yeah, but that's one of the documents, files that got lost in my fire.
Oh yeah, the very suspicious fire. Yeah.
Right.
Hey, Nancy, if you'll send me your email address, I'll send you a digital copy of it. So, Mary was great. I mean, and through the years, like I said, I've met and interviewed so many witnesses, guys, and I know you guys have talked to witnesses and researchers and things like that. So if this is boring, just tell me and we'll move on. But I got to interview Bobby Hargis, who gave a very candid interview. Everybody thought that since I was at the time 18, 19, 20-year-old kid, that they could kind of speak freely. So got to talk to Bobby Hargis, got to talk to James Tague, Gene Hill on numerous occasions, Dr. McClellan, Dr. Crenshaw. Actually, funny story with Dr. Crenshaw is I became a paramedic in 1988, right after I graduated high school. Went to work at John Peter Smith Hospital, which is a county hospital in Fort Worth. And the chair of trauma surgery was one Dr. Charles Crenshaw. And so I didn't know who he was, except for he was a great trauma surgeon. Well, then he and Gary write the book. I'm talking to Gary, and I said, wait a minute, I work with this guy. I know him. And so went back to work the next day and went up to Doc's office, and he goes, I understand you know a mutual friend. I said, yes, sir. He goes, suppose you want to talk about this. I said, yes, sir. He goes, here's my address. Won't you come for lunch on this weekend? And so I spent, I don't know, probably 3-4 hours that first day, and got to interview him numerous times. He was just a wonderful, kind and gracious guy. And one of the coolest things that I got to experience was anybody I interview, I always take a picture of them just so I can kind of put a face with a name, so to speak. And I asked him if we could do that. He said, yeah, sure. He said, let me go to, let's go sit in my office. I said, okay. So he goes in his office, and we sit down. He goes, "I'll be right back." And he goes and he pulls out this kind of off-white lab coat, and he pulls out this kind of really stiff old Littman stethoscope, and he puts the lab coat on, and he puts the stethoscope around his neck. And I didn't say this, but I'm thinking, I really don't want that old stuff in the picture. I really kind of want you as you. And he goes, "I bet you're kind of wondering, I bet you're kind of wondering what all this stuff is." I said, "Matter of fact, I am." He goes, "Well, this is my lab coat that I was wearing that weekend, and this is my stethoscope that I used."
Okay.
And at that moment, my jaw dropped.
Mm.
And after he passed, I'm not sure what happened to that, but I hope someone has it that appreciates it. So that was a really surreal, kind of cool experience for me.
Chris, can I just interrupt a second, because
Yeah.
I'm certainly interested in Bobby Hargis, and I see that Pete Mellor has asked the question because you know, the whole Roscoe White thing is flavour du jour at the moment, and you know, it's very interesting. For those of you that don't know, Brian Edwards and Gary Shaw have written a book on the whole Roscoe White affair, and it's just being released now. But of course, Michael Brownlow interviewed Bobby Hargis, and Bobby Hargis claims that you know, shortly after the shots, he was up on the knoll and he saw Roscoe White. Have you looked into that component of the Roscoe White story? Well, I mean, the Michael Brownlow interview with Bobby Hargis isn't that great, to be honest with you. He's got a very odd interviewing style. It's not the best, but what's your take? What's your take on? Obviously, sadly, he passed away, didn't he, in August this year? But August of last year. But what's your take on Bobby Hargis? And this might be a segue into the whole Roscoe White thing, of course.
You know, I'll be honest with you. Let me preface this with, I interviewed Bobby Hargis in 1988, and I haven't listened to those tapes in years, so I couldn't recall to you verbatim what I asked him or what he said. However, my impression at the time of Bobby Hargis was that he was a rough and gruff former police officer who had experienced the worst thing that you can experience as a police officer. And he had a very jaded opinion about it, but he also had a very open opinion. I do recall, because this stood out to me, I do recall that he said there is no effing way that son of a bitch shot him from that window with that fucking rifle.
Yeah, I mean, given the fact that he was all splattered with debris and into the right front side of him, that's pretty clear. Pete Mellor, does that answer where you're trying to go with Bobby Hargis? Pete's fallen asleep.
I'm just unmuting. Not really, but interesting all the same, you know. But also interesting to know that that Hargis didn't believe in the lone nut stuff, which I would think is fairly obvious.
Yeah,
pretty much, Pete. Pretty much the majority of the Dallas police officers, that I've interviewed, once you get them out of the official capacity, you know, catch them once they're retired or something like that. The majority that I have talked to, not everyone, but the majority that I've talked to, do not or did not believe the official story. And so some of them did, J.W. Foster did. But Hargis, Donald Fluchet, Roy Vaughn, just people like that, they did not. But I'll tell you what, Pete, if you will shoot me an email, I will dig those tapes out and go back and listen to them. And if there's anything specific, I'll be more than happy to try to further answer your question.
That sounds excellent, Chris. Yeah. Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Chris, have you transcribed your tapes at all?
I have not. Matter of fact, I've talked to Ryan numerous times about this. I have not transcribed my interview tapes, and I also have the complete, unedited, unabridged set of the House Select Committee audio tapes that they're on cassette tapes that I need to transcribe and
that's really easy to do. You
digitize.
just digitize it, tape it, and use that to transcribe from the tape automatically. I haven't done the transcribing bit, but I've digitized a lot of tapes from the Harry Livingston and Malcolm Blunt archives over the past few years. And it's, you buy a thing that looks like an old school Walkman cassette tape player, and you just put your cassette tapes in there, and then with Audacity software, which is really takes 15 minutes to learn basically, and try and play with, and then understand that you should always save in the highest resolution, and also an MP3 version of it, and then that's it. And you can just upload that basically to YouTube whatsoever, and then also use that audio to transcribe into text as such. I haven't done that yet, but I did too many. I did 350 cassette tapes. So after I'd done that, I was like, fuck off.
I understand that. Okay, good to know, Bart. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
If you don't want to go high tech, Chris, you want to do old school, and I know Nancy's a good transcriber, and also Craig Boozarth has done a lot of work for somebody, and I can't remember who he's done it for. He was telling me at your seminar. Can't remember who he's done it for, whether it's for the Project JFK guys or whatever. But anyway, if you want to go old school, he's certainly been doing it.
Okay, perfect. Great.
Nancy's, I've just put Nancy in it, but she said I'll be happy to help.
Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate that. Yes.
Yeah, that is, because that was going to be one of my questions about the HCSA tapes, because you mentioned that, well, not last year, the year before, because that's gold dust.
Are these the interviews like Frasier and Lovelady and all that?
Yes, these are all the interviews.
What is the quality of Frasier? Because what I've heard is absolutely terrible.
It's a lot of these tapes, they're decent quality. It's the best Frasier that I've heard, but it's still not great quality.
Right. I'll be very interested in that.
Okay. Once I get them, and of course, guys, I've been kind of slowed in my stuff, taking care of my wife. But once I get them, I'm more than happy to put them on a site, or put them on a disk or something, and send them to you guys.
Oh, just you start a Gmail address, because you get 15 gigs of Google Drive space. So you just upload it to that, and then you just right click on the folder and say create link, and share that link, and everybody got access to it as such, and can download it at their own behest. Easy.
Okay, works for me.
Yeah, well, that's great.
So yeah, no, that good suggestion. Here's the thing, guys. Like I said, I've been a paramedic for about 36 years. I'm really good at saving lives. I'm a fairly decent researcher when it comes to technology. That's why I have Ryan. So I could not do my luncheon without Ryan. If he ever didn't show up, my luncheon would be done. It would be over. So y'all don't need to ask me if I'm doing another luncheon. Ask Ryan if he's coming back.
Mm. Well, amongst Ryan and Bart and Tony Power is not here. I mean, there's certainly people here that can definitely help you, I think, with all that side of stuff.
Good deal. I appreciate that, guys. Thank you.
So going back to the witnesses. I mean, you mentioned a few of them. What are your highlights in terms of witnesses that you've met over the decades, either in terms of big reveals or whatever?
A lot of the witnesses that I've interviewed, I've actually got to be really good friends with, like Jean Hill. I was good friends with her. Roy Vaughn, and I'll circle back to him. I have a interesting story about Roy. And then Marianne Mormon, really good friends with her. Sweet lady. And then I've interviewed several Dallas police officers. I've interviewed several witnesses that were there that day. The Newmans. I've interviewed, of course, extensively Beverly Oliver, who I have become really, really good friends with, and her and Charles and Sharon and I, we get together and we do some things, and just people. And what's funny is yes, everybody witnessed this horrific event, and everybody was kind of silenced, so to speak, by it. But the thing that amazed me, and of course you got to remember, when I started interviewing these people, I was, like I said, 18, 19, 20 years old. And so I found out really quickly that they're just humans, and what I mean by that is they want to, a lot of them want to tell their story, but they didn't know how to tell their story. And I say that to kind of segue into this, that I've been a paramedic for the last 36 years. I was a sheriff's deputy for 11 years, and 6 of those years I spent on a drug task force as an undercover narcotics officer. So I got to go to numerous interview schools on how to interview suspects and conduct interviews and questions to ask and things like that. And that really and truly helped me with my interview style on witnesses. And it's interesting, I can go back and listen to my first few interview tapes, and I go, man, God, gum, you didn't know what you were doing, And then I can listen to my later interview tapes, like the ones I've done with Marianne Mormon, and it's a more concise, interview. And so my career, as Neil alluded on, my career has really helped, or careers have really helped with the understanding of the case, not only interview style, but I understand, police procedures. I understand weapons, and I understand ballistics. And I also, being the paramedic, I've kind of gravitated towards the medical side of things, and I've always been interested in the medical evidence. I don't believe that we have all the medical evidence, and I believe that a lot of the medical evidence that we have is not the true medical evidence. And
Oh
yeah, I know, shocker, right? So and so it's I've also always my two interests of this is, like I said, the medical evidence and the witnesses. I've always gravitated towards people telling their stories. Now, there are other people out there, and Jeff Meek, who I believe is a friend of Dealey Plaza UK, he has interviewed numerous people, numerous witnesses that some of which I hadn't heard of. And so, there are other people out there that have interviewed a lot of other witnesses. I'm sure some of you guys have as well. I can speak from my experiences. A lot of the ones that I've interviewed, like I said, they want to tell their story. They just don't know how to tell their story. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It does. So, you mentioned Roy Vaughn. I mean, you got very close to him, didn't you? Am I right in thinking that you were there when he was towards his passing? Is that right?
I was, yes. My ex-wife used to work for Roy Vaughn when he was a justice of the peace in Midlothian, Texas. And Midlothian is kind of the hotspot of outside of Dallas. I mean, because you had Roy Vaughn there, you had Roger Craig there, you had Penn Jones there, a lot of kind of activity there. But I got to know Roy through my ex-wife, and the very first night that I met him, he walks in, and Roy Vaughn was a tall, imposing man. He was, I believe, 6'6", and he walks through the door, and he sticks his hand out, and my little hand just kind of got engulfed by his, and he goes, "Hi, I'm Roy Vaughn." I said, "Well, I'm Chris Gallop." He goes, "Melissa tells me that you know who I am." I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "Well," and he kind of gripped my hand a little bit tighter. He said, "I'll tell you right now, some bitch didn't come down that damn ramp." And I said, "Okay." I said, I've always believed you on that. And so through the years, we got to know each other, and me and my wife and ex-wife, and then he and his wife Margie, we'd get together and have dinners, and so he and I would have a lot of time to talk. And he was doing an interview one time that they were retracing Oswald's steps. It was a documentary type thing. So he calls me up and he says, "Hey, would you like to come down here to the basement? I'm giving an interview." And I was like, "Sure, yeah, great." And so went down there, and I got to walk in the footsteps with Roy Vaughn, where he was standing, what he could see, what exactly he did. He even showed me there's a door in the Dallas basement that they called the in and out door. And that door was unlocked when they needed to get somebody in or somebody out because it backed up to an alley. And he said that door was unlocked all weekend.
Yeah.
So fast forward to when Roy got sick, and he almost or finally did succumb to prostate cancer. His wife Margie called, and she said, "Hey," she said, "maybe today, maybe tomorrow, but he doesn't have a lot of time left. So if you guys want to come say your goodbyes, please do." And so my ex-wife and I go over there, and she's in the living room talking to Margie, and I go back there, and Roy's kind of in and out of consciousness. And I said, "Hey, Roy," I said, "this is Chris. I'm here." I said, "Just want to, thank you for your friendship, and thank you for your willingness to talk." And he opened his eyes, and he reached out and took my hand. He gripped my hand, and kind of lifted his head up. And he looked at me square in the eyes, and he said, "That sumbitch didn't come down that damn ramp." And the significance of that is you can go back and you can listen to interviews with him. You can read testimonies from him. And he said that he would say that until his dying day. He never once changed his story.
Yeah.
Okay. And he sure didn't. He was a very very honorable man.
That's an awesome story.
Thank you, thank you. He was a very honorable man. He Donald Flouchet, who was another officer with the Dallas Police Department, he's very famously said of Roy Vaughn. He said, if Roy Vaughn tells you it's Christmas, you better go hang your stocking up because it's true.
Yeah, yeah. David,
Hey,
I don't know if you know research about David Josephs, do you, Chris? But he did a really good talk for us on the whole Oswald shooting and how Ruby may well have accessed the City Hall complex, and I think he's referring to the same door that you've just referred to, where Ruby may have entered. And the other thing is actually quite interesting. Johnny's on the call, David Ward is on the call, Scott. We went to City Hall last November in Dallas. I don't know if you were aware that there was an event there for researchers and so forth, and it was a fascinating experience.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to go to that. I was I had other things that I had that were more pressing. But yeah, I'm sorry I missed out on that with you guys.
I mean, I think it was probably the highlight of our, well, we had a few highlights, but it was probably the highlight of our trip, actually, notwithstanding your symposium, of course. But yeah, it was absolutely fascinating to put all the different rooms and northwest, southeast, into perspective, because you're just kind of looking at photos and bird's eye maps and drawings, internal drawings and so forth. But when you're there, you really get the context of everything.
Sure. Yeah.
What I was going to say,
Hey, Neil, I've got
Sorry.
a quick follow-up question for Chris while we're talking about Roy Vaughn, if that's okay.
yeah,
Chris, if you don't know, it's totally fine. Or I'm wondering if he ever said so. The door that you talked about, you said he called, I believe, the in and out door.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the same door that is in question as it relates to the Patrick Dean story about what door may or may not have been locked while he? Okay, I see you nodding your head. So I was just curious if that's the same door we were talking about. Okay,
Same door.
Yep. All right, that's all I had. Just wanted to follow up while we were still in that wheelhouse.
okay, thanks, Ryan. I mean, obviously, you got very close to Roy Vaughan. Did he make any suggestions at all, Chris, that there were bad actors, bad apples amongst the DPD? That were maybe ex ante involved in this thing? I mean, I know that Ryan's just mentioned Patrick Dean. We've got the favourites of Westbrook and Croy and Hill and so forth. Did he mention anything about a possible, ex ante rather than cover up aspect to this?
He didn't talk about. He never talked about other officers, if they were involved, except for Patrick Dean. The nicest thing he ever said about Patrick Dean was that he was an asshole, and that was the nicest thing that he ever said about Dean. So, but as far as pointing the blame at other officers or something like that, in all the talks that we've had or that we had, no, he never mentioned anybody, hey, so and so was involved or so and so helped do this. So it was just he always spoke highly of his time with the Dallas Police Department, and all he would ever say is that things got really botched, and it was botched on all sides. And I took that to mean that it was botched by the government, it was botched by the police department, it was botched by the investigations and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Did anyone ever mention anything about Will Fritz to you?
In what context, Bart?
Just in general, whatever chatter you had, that they mentioned Will Fritz and his ways, and those detectives were like, well, they were the elite within the DPD and basically regarded as such and got away with a lot as well at the same time. But those people that you spoke to in Dallas, related to the DPD? Did they ever mention Will Fritz?
About the only thing that collectively they mentioned to me about Will Fritz is that there was a certain way of doing things, and then there was the Will Fritz way of doing things. So you know, I mean, I really and truly, that's pretty much all that they would elaborate. You know, they wouldn't take nobody, and I understand this from a law enforcement perspective. It's really hard for former law enforcement officers, especially subordinates, to talk about their leaders during a big investigation or something like that. It's kind of that code that they have, the unwritten, you know, thin blue lines, so to speak. So they never would, you know, nobody ever said anything derogatory about him. But it was just, you know, there was certain way of doing things, and then there was the Will Fritz way of doing things. So
Yeah. Thank you.
yes.
Patrick Dean's son was at that tour we did in City Hall. Do you remember that, Neil?
I don't actually know.
Yeah, the woman announced it, and that's when everyone started applauding for the Dallas police in the 1960s.
Oh no, was that Patrick Dean's son? That guy?
Yeah, aye. And
Oh, that's when I made the comment, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we should be applauding the Dallas police in the 1960s.
Yeah, probably not. There is,
What was that Patrick Dean's son, or was it Patrick? There was another McGeekrin or something. There was another police officer. I thought it was maybe his son and not
No,
Patrick.
she
Maybe I'm
definitely said she definitely said Patrick Dean.
Did she? Right.
that would have been interesting to be at. I might have asked some questions or made some comments.
Oh, we were kept away. We were the riffraff. We were in Group 1 and we got kept away from.
Yeah, it would have all gone off with the lone nut contingent that was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Chris, you mentioned being a deputy sheriff. Did you get close to anybody from the sheriff's department in Dallas that were involved in the 60s at all?
Not really close. I got to interview on a couple of occasions Gene Boone, but I never, you know, Roger Craig had already passed by the time I kind of got, you know, got interested in this and into the interviewing, but never really got you know, close to anybody in the sheriff's department. I've read a lot of books, you know, of course, about Bill Decker and his ways of doing things. The Decker way, so to speak. You know, I think Bart knows what I'm talking about.
The Fritz way and the Decker way.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And the Henry Wade way.
And I was saying, then you have the Wade way. Hey guys, it is a hard video to find. You might be able to find it on YouTube, but there's a film, and I believe it was in the late 60s, early 70s, but it's called The Thin Blue Line.
Yeah.
Okay. That tells you and shows you exactly how things were done.
It's really funny. Gus Rose is in that thing, and he's accused of basically shoving a pre-written statement in front of the suspect at that time. And I thought, gee, that's exactly what Will Fritz did with Buell Frazier.
Well, that's the
you know,
you know, I mean,
yeah,
that happened, Bart. That happened more times than not, you know, and not just with this case. I mean, with, you know, with any case, if they wanted a conviction, so to speak, you know, they would go in and basically
they beat you up.
Yeah, bully and intimidate and scare the hell out of these people.
Yeah,
you know, and kind of gave him no choice but to confess. You know, good for Bill Frazier being a 19-year-old kid standing up and going, no, you know, you can go to hell. I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah, the thin blue line was the Randall Adams case.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The Dallas police went after Adams. They knew he wasn't the killer, but they went after him because they knew the real killer was underage and couldn't get the death penalty.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's all about padding the numbers. You know, Henry Wade is the Wade in Roe versus Wade. So he was always looking for higher office, so to speak. You know, but yeah, it's a very interesting movie.
Is there actually, I have to ask you direct, there isn't a lot of research in all these misdeeds of the Dallas police or just in Texas and when it comes to justice and so forth from those days. I mean, the more you read about it, you know, the deeper you go into, like what I've done over the past 8 years about the Dallas police and just reading about it and just, you know, that it's the way it was and all that, you know, and I know to an extent that's true, but at the same time, it's also a bit like, yeah, it's not borderline. It is criminal. Some of it is just downright criminal and corrupt. And yeah, and yet I can't find a lot about it online. Very, very little about it as such. Now, the only book that gave me some insights was the Edmund Gray book, who used to work for Henry Wade. And he writes about Wade, basically. And in that book, astonishing fact came out that the miscarriages of justice is tenfold of the nation's average in Texas, basically. It was the tenfold, 10 times as much in Texas compared to the rest of the nation as such. And then they basically started digging into how Wade did all these things. But at the same time, he's also good enough to keep all that DNA in store as such. And therefore, people were basically to get the injustice cases, some of those cases reversed as such. That is because of Wade actually ordered everyone to keep the evidence in storage as such, you know, because normally it would have been destroyed already after a decade or so. And he said, no, keep it in.
Yeah, to answer your question, Bart, there's really not a lot that I've seen as well written either books or online or even in interviews from, you know, former prosecutors or even defense attorneys or officers from back in that era. The 50s, 60s, and 70s in Texas were not red letter decades in law enforcement. You know, shall we say, it was still a lot of the good old boy system, and that's the way it's always been done, type thing. Sadly, it's still that way to a small extent, but not the extent that it was. But I haven't seen a whole lot of written material or oral material on you know, anybody talking negatively about Henry Wade or the Dallas PD or anything like that. If I come across something, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
To be fair to the Dallas police, they never done that bad a job. I mean, look how quickly they caught Jack Ruby.
Yeah. yeah. That's a valid point there. I mean,
really quickly, if I may add. Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like a record arrest there, you know. So.
Yeah. Probably actually would be past the threat.
Johnny, was it Jack Ruby?
Oh, God.
Oh Lord. Oh Lord.
God. Not that.
Da, 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 da.
Ruby has a bag over his head, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And on that note, guys, it's been fun. Thank y'all.
So just to sum up, so Greer shot Kennedy.
Wait, I thought Jackie did.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it was a yeah, exactly. I think that could be a nice segue into your grandfather and the Adolphus story. Do you want to just enlighten the group with that anecdote?
Oh yeah, you were asking me who my favorite person to interview was, and honestly, that was probably my grandfather. My grandfather was C.E. Nichols, and I need to preface this with saying that I grew up with the two best grandfathers that a guy could ask for. They have made me the man that I am today. They taught me how to treat people, taught me how to live life, and you know, you get what you give type thing. So I would not be where I'm at today without both of my grandfathers. Now, my one grandfather on my mom's side, C.E. Nichols, and I said that my mom grew up in Dallas. My grandfather was a bell captain at the Adolphus Hotel. The Adolphus Hotel, as you guys are probably aware of, was right across the street from Jack Ruby's Carousel Club. Well, Ruby would come in from time to time, and he would pass out his Carousel Club cards trying to drum up business. And he would walk over to my grandfather. They called my grandfather Nicky. He'd walk over to my grandfather, and Jack would hand him a card, and Papa would smile, and he'd say, "Oh, Jack, Evelyn, my grandmother, she'd skin me alive. She'd catch me in your club." He'd hand the card back to Ruby, and they'd laugh about it. Ruby'd slap him on the back and walk off. And he said, Papa always said that Ruby was a very snappy dresser. He just tailored suits, and the little string tie and shirt was always tucked in, and hair was always neat, and the hat was always on, perfect. Shoes were shined. Kind of fast forward to November 21st of 1963. Ruby comes in, and Papa described him as looking very disheveled. Suit was wrinkled, shirt was untucked, hair was a mess, tie was untied. Makes a beeline to my grandfather, and he starts to hand him a card. My grandfather, kind of smiles, and he goes, "Oh, Jack." And that's all that my grandfather got out.
No question. A little bit in
Ruby,
there. Last time, no question.
One
How do I
second.
say no to you?
Is that-
Okay, no, we're not gonna. No. Wait,
Okay, I think that was Ryan's family, was it?
way to go, Ryan.
No. It was actually. I think it was Joe's microphone, and I just muted him.
Oh, okay.
And so my grandfather, goes, "Oh, Jack," and that's all he got out. Ruby pulls a pin out of my grandfather's suit coat, and he says, "God damn it, Nicky, you keep this card. It's going to be worth something one day." And he flips it over and he signs it on the back. Except admit party, except Saturday, Jack Ruby, and shoves it in his suit pocket and walks out. And Papa's thinking, okay, that's Jack being Jack, no big deal. So my grandfather gets off, takes his goes home, takes his uniform coat on, and puts it on his little valet there. The card is still in his pocket. They're sitting there, assassination happens, and then, like everybody else around the world, they're glued to their TV sets that weekend. Fast forward to Sunday, my grandfather is sitting in his recliner, my grandmother is sitting in her chair, and my mom and my two aunts are sitting kind of Indian style in front of them, all watching their little, I think mom said it was a 14-inch TV, all watching their little TV. And they break in for the transfer of Oswald. Ruby comes through the crowd, shoots Oswald. My grandfather took a sip of tea, and he kind of leaned forward, shook his head, and he went, well, God damn, Jack. And he gets up, goes to his bedroom, takes that carousel club out of his pocket, puts it in an envelope, sticks it in his top drawer of the armoire, and that's where it stayed until May of 1988. And then that is the card right there. That's the front of it. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay.
That's not being given away at your luncheon, is it?
No, actually it's not. And then there's the back.
Chris, I believe you have told me on a number of occasions, though, everything has a price. So
Everything does have a price. I mean, now, whose price? My price or Sharon's price? So you can imagine my surprise when I go up in May, and my grandfather's always interested in what how we were doing in school, and I had just turned my my research paper in. I was waiting on the grade. This was around Mother's Day weekend in May, and so I told him, I said, I wrote a research paper on the Kennedy assassination. He goes, oh, are you interested in that? I said, yes, sir. I said, I think that our government lied to us, and I think that there's more to it than what they're telling us. And he goes, come here. And when my grandfather said come here, there was just a difference in his voice that I hadn't heard before. And so we walk into his bedroom, and he sets me down in the bed, and he opens up the armoire and hands me an envelope. He says, here. And I pull it out, and it wasn't in the case that I have it in now. It was just the card. And I pull it out, and he goes, do you know what that is? I said, yes, sir. I know exactly what that is. And he said, well, flip it over. So I flipped it over, and he goes, you know who that is? I said, yes, sir. I know who that is. And then he proceeds to tell me the story about it. And it was kind of a surreal moment for me, knowing that I had a family member that interacted very closely with Jack Ruby,
Yeah.
And then he said, if you think my story is interesting, you need to go talk to your Uncle Wayne. And I've not shared this story with anybody. He said, go talk to your Uncle Wayne. I said, okay. And so I made arrangements, called my Uncle Wayne. I said, hey, Papa tells me I need to talk to you about Jack Ruby. And you know how you're ever talking to somebody on the phone and it just kind of goes dead on the other end, just kind of silence. And about 5 minutes later, Uncle Wayne, he goes, all right, well, let's meet next week. So I go to his little apartment in Oak Cliff and interview him for about 4 hours. And the gist of the interview is my Uncle Wayne owned a set of apartment complexes. And I don't know, I'd have to go back and look at my notes. I don't remember the exact apartment complexes, but I will go back and get that. But he owned a set of apartment complexes, and he said, He said, I had an arrangement with Jack. He said, I would supply the apartments and he would supply the girls. And he said, we entertained people from out of town. We entertained people from the Dallas Police Department. You name it, we entertained them. So
That was in Oak Cliff.
it was
Chris.
in Oak Cliff. Yes.
Whereabouts? What's the address? Not that I'm.
I like I said, I'd have to go back and look at my notes on him.
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, that was like I said back in '88 when I interviewed him. And I'm old now and I've forgotten more than I know. So
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Well, look, we're nearly an hour and a half into this. Can we just have a comfort break or a drinks break if anybody wants to grab a drink? I'll just see if I can I'll pause the recording and just give us a few minutes. Yeah.
Record.
Okay, so we're back on the record. Chris, are you back?
I am.
Good. Okay. So, should we? I mean, we can come back to all the researchers and witnesses and so forth, but just to update your story, what? Well, perhaps you can talk about, how did Mansfield start, and what sort of research that you're working on now. I know that you, in November last year, you were looking at a couple of different presentations for one of the conferences. Can you just sort of bring us up to date a bit and tell us how Mansfield started?
Sure. Yeah. The 50th anniversary was quickly approaching, and I knew that I wanted to do something. I wanted to have I knew a lot of researchers were coming into town, and so I wanted to have a small luncheon for basically just some friends, just to have a couple of researchers come and speak, and kind of a intimate one and done type thing. And so had it at the Belmont Hotel in Dallas, which is about 2 blocks east of Dealey Plaza. And it just kind of took a life of its own. Before I knew it, I had 8 speakers, and I had about 60 people that said they were interested in coming and had paid for a barbecue lunch. And I really thought that it was going to be a one and done thing. I had no interest in doing it again. And then about January, I started getting emails and text messages and things that, hey, when's your luncheon? Who's going to speak this year? And things like that. And so it just kind of evolved from there. I formed, started calling my luncheon JFK, the Continuing Inquiry, after Penn Jones. I asked Gary about this, and Gary said that, I said, well, what do you think Penn would say about this? And he, Gary, in typical Gary fashion, he said that he thought Penn would be very pleased with it. And so I created a Facebook group of the same name. If you guys aren't members of it, please feel free to join. I'd love to have all you guys. And it just kind of started from there. This last one was probably one of the better ones that I've had. And, I've always been able to get speakers. I mean, speakers that don't really speak at mainstream conferences. I've had Gary Shaw there just about every one. I've had Sherry Feaster. I had Roger Stone, and I had Jim Mars. I've had Tosh Plumley. I've had Gail Nix Jackson. see, I've had Marianne Mormon. I had Hubert Clark. Just some, these are just some of the ones that I've had. Jeff Meek. These are just some of the ones that I've had through the years, and it's just kind of taken on a life of its own, so to speak. And then I moved it to Fort Worth, about 2 blocks away from Oswald's grave, and been having it there. This was my 2nd year there for that, and yeah. So if you guys are in town, y'all come on by. Love to have y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great event, and I don't know if I did mention earlier on. I mean, your generosity in the prize, the raffle draw is outstanding. I mean, it's some really good stuff.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I think Mike Phillip is Mike on the call. Mike isn't he? He's Mike. Didn't you win the Oswald wallet and its contents? Is that you?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I've still got it. Yeah, brilliant. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I thought you won that, Mike. Yeah, I wasn't sure. So
Very, very impressive. Yeah.
Which wallet was it though?
Yeah. Okay. Found at the Tippett murder scene.
Which one?
Yeah.
Chris, did you have any $87 bottles of wine that you're giving out in the prize giving?
Do I?
Did you have any $87 bottles of wine that you were giving out?
No.
That's for the bigger round. That's for the 75th anniversary, Johnny.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And how many bottles?
Yeah.
That's for the big one. All right.
No,
So
my raffles, my giveaway is, like I said, that kind of evolved. I didn't do that at my first one, and it just kind of evolved because I do my luncheons the way that, this is something I would like to attend, and I would like to win or have the chance to win really good raffle drawings. And so every speaker that I have that has a book or books out, they very graciously donate books. And then throughout the year, I'll look at, different things, try to find different things either from my personal collection or just, find them, buy, sell, trade, or, things like that, and get them framed or whatever, and give them out, because I want people to, not only have the experience of listening to great speakers, witnesses, authors, things like that, but I want people to be able to have a book or hang something on their wall and go, hey, yeah, I won this at a luncheon that I went to, especially for you guys over in the UK. I mean, it's kind of cool because that not only does that make you guys kind of look at it and go, hey, yeah, I won this, or like Mike said, I won the wallet. Scott won Bart's book, or but it gives y'all a chance to, in a way, to promote it. And I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah. Okay. So what about the current research, some of the recent stuff you've been looking into?
Couple of things that I've looked into and still working on is I've got a presentation. I don't really want to expand on it, but I've got a presentation on right now it's just the Dealey Plaza witnesses, where they were, who they were, what they saw, what they heard, and why they weren't called. So I'm working on that currently. And I just noticed, let me jump to this. I noticed that Joseph posted, Harry Connick Sr. Passed away the other day. And, he was the DA after Jim Garrison. interesting side note to that, to the Garrison story. A story goes, a staffer, as Harry Connick Sr. was coming into office, a staffer found two filing cabinets that were packed away, and they were full of Jim Garrison's Kennedy inquiry, and from the Clay Shaw case. And Harry Connick Sr. very famously, supposedly said, "I don't want that shit anywhere near my office. Just get it out, throw it away." And so we have no clue what happened to that stuff. But back to the little side note, I just saw that pop up there on the chat. So just sorry about sidetracking. And then the other thing, one of the other things I'm working on is the story of John Henry Hill. And I believe John Henry Hill, he was a Texas oilman. Remember I told you I mentioned the name Roger Tittle in my research paper? Roger Tittle was also a Texas oilman. He was from, wound up in my hometown of Cleburne, Texas. And he was good friends with John Henry Hill. John Henry Hill was good friends with LBJ. Texas Oil runs with Texas politics. And there's a story corroborated by, right now I found two, I'm sure there's more out there, witnesses with depositions of a tall Texan with a long overcoat with a rifle tucked up under it, walking towards Dealey Plaza, walking down Commerce Street towards Dealey Plaza. And I believe from all descriptions and accounts, I believe that gentleman is John Henry Hill. So I'm still working on that, trying to piece all that together. Another one that I've been working on is, the picture of Oswald in the Marine Corps firing the rifle. Everybody know the picture?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you be shocked to know that is not Lee Harvey Oswald?
Hell no. I don't believe in Harriet and Lillian either. So, there have been quite a few pictures that have been attributed to Oswald, and it's just complete and utter bollocks. The Bronx Zoo picture as well. Look at the schnoz that kid has. Okay, got massive fat nose. Noses don't shrink, not like that, or seize up like that, So that kid who looks very similar to Oswald isn't Oswald, but it's being sold as Oswald in Bronx. So there you go.
Oh yeah. Well, I can tell you, I never say 100% certainty. I can tell you with 99% certainty that the Marine picture that is purported to be Lee Harvey Oswald is one Private David Stewart. And David Stewart has absolutely nothing to do with the Kennedy assassination or this whole cover up or anything nefarious or anything like that.
But does he look like Oswald?
He does look like Oswald. I was contacted several years ago by his family and said, "Hey, we understand that you do Kennedy research, and we would like to, present you with this and see if you can do something with it to kind of clear our dad's name, so to speak." And so they sent me documents and photographs in his Marine yearbook. And I have another picture on that same firing line taken from the opposite direction of David Stewart. And you can clearly tell it is not Lee Harvey Oswald. So those are
time for a book, Chris.
Yeah. People keep telling me I need to write one, but I don't know. I'm not a writer.
You got plenty of material. So yeah. It's just transcribing it, man. So
Right. I'm not a. I mean, the only paper I wrote, I failed. So I mean, I kind of don't want to, throw myself out there again. So.
I mean, if I can write a book, then so can you, man. So
Well, I heard yours is good though. So.
oh, thank you. Yeah,
But,
the response has been good. So.
Good. So yeah, those are the three things that right now I'm working on. I hope to expand my witness thing to other witnesses. Dallas police officers. Oak Cliff witnesses. Texas theater witnesses. I've tracked down 2 Texas theater witnesses that were in the theater when Oswald was arrested.
Oh,
So I'm in the process of tracking them down. They've asked me not to release their names until I get everything ready. So out of respect for them, I'm gonna not release it. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much what I've got going and helping. I've always been the type of researcher. I guess Gary and Penn both instilled this in me that I if I have something and you're researching it, or you need it or whatever, just email me, shoot me an email or shoot me a private message on Facebook or something. And man, if I have it, I'm more than happy to make a copy of it or throw it online or something for you guys to help y'all out.
what's your email address?
cjgallop@yahoo.com.
Okay.
Well, just on that note, Chris, I mean, when you do get to a point where you'd like to present, I think the presentation on the witnesses, whether it's DD Platts or even into Oak Cliff or elsewhere, who weren't called or not known, I think that would be a cracking presentation that you could make to us at some point if you're interested, either a monthly Zoomcast or at one of we have 2 seminars a year, York and Canterbury. If you'd like to do that, then we'd be excited to hear that.
Oh, I'd be more than happy to. Yeah. As soon as I get it put together, I'll be more than happy to do that. And Pete asked a question. He said, "Was the hill sighting on Commerce Street similar to the sighting of a man with blonde crew cut, well built, walking with gun case on Ackerd heading towards Elm around 12 noon?" Yes, Pete. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Do you know, I mean, I asked Bart this on his last talk. Do you know who the cowboy is in front of the TSBD? Did you ever track that guy down? The
Stetson man.
Yeah, Stetson man. Do you know? Because I know that.
I have not, to be honest with you.
Okay. Because he was
He
was in a great
standing
position
on the stairs as well afterwards with the black guys from the 5th floor. Bonnie Ray Williams is standing on the steps in a William Allen photo, and Stetson man is standing there. I don't know. I don't see any interaction, but they're standing. He's standing on the steps basically before they all get cajoled out by the cops.
Right.
But,
Yeah, I know the picture, and I know who you're talking about. I just haven't looked into him.
Yeah. And just Chris, on the sharing stuff, I mean, that does resonate with us. I mean, this group does not hoard stuff. I mean, Bart has distributed a hell of a lot of stuff over the years to people that are interested in a specific subject. And, Johnny and Scott do. Nancy's very, very open. So that really does resonate with us.
Well, good. Yeah, like I said, I mean, guys, I've been doing this since 1987. And so you can ask Ryan, and I wish I had a camera where I could show you my office, but you can ask Ryan. I have a lot of stuff here in my office. So if you guys are looking for anything, or if you're researching a particular thing, or interested in a tape or something that I have, man, just please let me know. Ryan put my email up on the group chat. So shoot me an email, or like I said, if you're on Facebook, send me a message on Facebook Messenger. And I'd love to have you guys join my JFK, the continuing inquiry.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Yeah, so should we look at some of the controversial subjects within the within the case? And I'm not talking sewers, I'm not talking Jackie, I'm not talking Will Greer, but some of the things which are less extreme than that. And bear in mind the audience that we have tonight. Can you give us your views on, just to throw them out there, the lunchroom encounter, Prayer Man, whether the Zapruder film or other films have been altered, or you in the Grodin camp, some of these sort of controversial areas. You can touch on perhaps Beverly Oliver, or maybe Jack Tatum, Johnny come lately witness on the Tippett shooting, maybe Judy Baker. Go wherever you want. Some of the more controversial aspects. What sort of core positions?
Well, I'll start with Beverly Oliver. Beverly has been a friend to me, a friend of mine on, gosh, like I said, 10 years plus. Okay. She first came to light in 1970. Met Gary Shaw at a reunion or a revival, church revival in Joshua, Texas, which is in between Burleson, where I live now, and Cleburne, which is where Gary grew up and lives. And if all that time, how do I want to say this? Nobody else has ever come forward and said, I'm the Babushka lady. This is my film. This is where I was standing. This is what happened. Beverly Oliver has done that. Beverly Oliver has, for the most part, not changed her story about where she was and what she did that day. So until somebody else comes up with definitive proof that, no, she's lying, I'm the true Babushka lady, or my mom was the Babushka lady, and here's how I know. I believe Beverly Oliver. I 100% believe her. And I'm of the camp that if you don't, then that's on you. But there's proof, there's evidence that it is her. And so until somebody proves me different, then, if she's good enough for Gary Shaw, then she's good enough for me. Okay. Let's see. Let's go on to somebody else. Tosh Plumley. Scott wants to know about Tosh. I like Tosh. Tosh is a really good guy. Really fun to talk to. I believe Tosh's story about being a pilot, and I'm not 100% sure about Tosh's story of being in Dealey Plaza, sitting on the South Knoll, and being part of the abort team. An honest answer, I just really haven't looked into that aspect of Tosh's story. So I did have him speak at my symposium. I think he has a very interesting story. I just don't know if all parts of his story are 100% factual, if that makes sense. Let's see. Yeah, Nancy, are you talking about the Chokeholds book? Nancy said the new Babushka lady claim is as Jerry Cobb in new book?
Right, the one where they're talking about Jerry Cobb is really June Cobb, which I think is a long stretch. No, not that one. This is a book about Jerry Cobb directly.
The Woman I Know. Yes.
Yes, that one.
Yes. Yeah, I've not read that one yet. Matter of fact, I just got 2 books delivered from Amazon, so it's probably one of those. But yeah, I've heard that claim. I think it's a stretch as well. I don't think there's any basis to it. So I'm going to be interested to see how they try to spin that. Let's see, who else did you ask me about? Sorry.
How about Judy Baker? That's a favorite one.
Well, I had Judah speak at my first luncheon. She went over, I mean, tells a very compelling story. There is no doubt in my mind that she crossed paths with Oswald, okay, in New Orleans. There's no doubt in my mind. Where the doubt in my mind comes in is if they were hot and heavy, in love and in bed, people talk. I don't care how trained you are or whatever, people talk. And so I would have thought that there would be, pictures of them 2 together if they were truly being watched. I mean, hell, we have a picture of Oswald in Mexico City. That's not really Oswald. So, so I say all that to say that I believe parts of her story. I don't know what to think about other parts of her story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Film alteration, I mean, that really does split the community, doesn't it?
It does. Matter of fact, the lunch I had with Gary and Robert Groden the other day, that subject came up, and Gary brought up a really good point, and I had thought about this for some time. People think that the Zapruder film is altered. I do not think the Zapruder film is altered. The reason why I don't think the Zapruder film is altered is because in order to alter that Zapruder film, you would have to alter the Nix film, the Muchmore film, the Hughes film, and they didn't do that. They all show the same thing. And so the only people that had the technology to basically cut and splice and animate and fill voids and things like that were Walt Disney back in the 60s. They were the animation specialists. And I've seen no evidence that Walt Disney was involved in the alteration of the Zapruder film. I've seen no evidence that anybody was involved in the alteration of the Zapruder film. Now, did Time Life, screw some of it up by, splicing it and destroying frames either on purpose or by accident? Yeah, they did. But did they alter the film? No. The same film that Abraham Zapruder took that day over 60 years ago is the same film that we see now.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I mean, we could spend an hour just on that question, really. So let's move on. Yeah, what about Oswald's whereabouts at the time of the shooting? The lunchroom encounter, whether it's hoax or not, and or whether he's on the TSBD steps. Do you have a strong view on that aspect of it?
Don't really have a strong view. I just because I haven't really spent a lot of time looking into that. There are other people that that research that. It's kind of like Penn Jones said, pick one aspect and research the hell out of it. That's not my aspect. But I believe that Oswald was where he said he was, in the second floor lunchroom, drinking a Coke. I think the lunchroom encounter, I think that's exactly where he was. Now, as far as being on the steps, or was it, Billy Lovelady? I don't know. I mean, I tend to think it was Lovelady, just because that's all that I've read and I've researched. Like I said, I really haven't gone down that rabbit hole. But as far as in the lunchroom, I think that's exactly where Oswald was.
Okay. I think others might disagree with that one.
I think so. Yeah. And here's the thing with any of this, these are my opinions. Okay. And just like with anything else that I've said, if you can show me definitive proof that I'm wrong, man, I'll be the first one to tell you, okay, you're right, I'm wrong. Okay. I'm not saying that what I'm saying is 100% gospel. It's just, these are my opinions based on either what I've read or research that I've personally done. Okay. So I don't want you guys to think that I'm coming across going, nope, I'm telling you right now, 100% fact. No, it's these are my opinions.
Yeah, no, I think that's very fair enough. So what about, let's talk about some of the more recent revelations then, because some of the stuff we've just discussed is quite old, but how do you feel, I mean, just a few subjects recently that have come up. I mean, Mayor Cabell being a CIA asset, that was revealed a few years ago. Chana Willis, Chana, she was at your symposium.
Yes.
Her story about, her father was CIA and ONI and filmed the assassination, around kind of where Zapruder or a shooter might have been. I think the Paul Landis reveal is very interesting. That was a big splash in October last year, and obviously he appeared at the Cyril Wecht conference. And then only just the other day, I mean, this Vicky Adams thing that came up, this appearance with Mort Sahl and Mark Lane, where she emphatically says in this interview that Lovelady and Shelley were down there in the rear of the TSBD. So I've just chosen a few things there that have come out quite recently. Do you have any strong opinions on any of that stuff at all?
I haven't really looked into the Vicky Adams story. To be honest with you, that's kind of a new thing that just recently came out. So I really haven't had a chance to dive into that. The Paul Landis, we have, when it first came out, I was like, there's no way. He's a decorated Secret Service guy that would not pocket a bullet and hold on to that story for 60 years. And then I went back and I started reading Doris Nelson, and I started reading other people at Parkland, their testimonies. And we have some corroborating testimonies that I can see where the Landis story has some credibility to it. Now, I'll be honest with you, I have his book. I have not read his book yet. But I can see where it can have some credibility to it. So yeah, I'm going to kind of hold off judgment on that until I read the book and I learn, a little bit more about it. What were some of the other ones, Neil? Sorry.
Well, Chana, she's
Chana
emerged in the last couple of years.
Yep. I first met Chana when, let me back up. Before Jim Mars passed away, we, and I say we, Gary and myself went to a dinner with Jim Mars and Dan Storper. And Dan and Jim were going to go interview this lady whose dad filmed the assassination and who was former CIA and has a story to tell. And, of course, that, piqued an interest to all of us. As I've gotten to know Chana, I can see a lot of credence to her story. I'm very curious to see. Let me backtrack. I have not seen any of the evidence that she says that she has. Okay. I've not seen any of the documents or anything like that. However, I've talked to her on numerous occasions, and I'm holding judgment to kind of see what's done with that and until I can lay eyes on things. But I do think it has some credence to it. I just don't know how much credence it has to it.
Yeah, I stayed at her house in Winnsboro in 22, and I saw a lot of documentation. She went through loads and loads of material with me, all validating claims of being ONI and CIA. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But the next leap is very difficult because there's no evidence of that she can show at this point of Oswald and her dad being part of this team, in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, and of course there's no film, and so this is the bit that I said to her that it's a really, really interesting life story, but the leap into November 22nd is going to be very, very difficult.
And I agree with that. I just need to, and she's told me numerous times, we just need to find a time to get together, and I'm welcome to drive up there. It's about an hour and a half away from where I'm at, but I'm welcome to drive up there and see the documentation for myself. But honestly, Neil, I would probably come to the same conclusion of what you did. Now at the luncheon this year, my luncheon this year, she did say that she came across, and I don't know when she came across, but she came across a box of film canisters that her dad had filmed, and one of the canisters was marked military man. And I can't help but think that the military man, if there's a film in there, and if it is of, and I say if it is of Dealey Plaza on the 22nd of 63, I can't help but think that film would be Gordon Arnold's.
Yeah, the one that was taken. Yeah,
but
yeah.
I don't know. Going back to the Roscoe White story, purportedly there was an encounter with Gordon Arnold and Roscoe White. I don't know if that actually happened or not. So it's just hers is a very interesting story that I think she's doing it. I think she's doing it the right way of not really sharing a whole lot and keeping a lot close to the vest and just researching what she can out of it.
Yeah, no, I think she's a decent human being, Chris, absolutely. And she entertained me and looked after us, and her husband Tex drove me to Ryan's the next day, which was no short drive. But it's just difficult to prove and take that. She had said she'd found some other stuff, but I didn't get to see her. I didn't get to see her presentation at the DoubleTree at that conference. I didn't see that one. I know you were obviously there with your pitch, but did you see that presentation?
I did, and it was basically the stuff that we have been discussing. This is who I am. This is who my dad was. This is what I found. And it was kind of an overview for lack of a better word, an overview of her research. So, like I said, I'm curious to see what comes out of that.
Okay, fair enough. Scott, you've raised your hand. Is it on this subject? Scott?
Yeah, it's just an anecdote I've got. I think it was maybe 2017, maybe 2018. In the summer, I was in Dallas with a friend, and we met Chana, and she started to tell, started to tell the story of her father, and she brought with her like a military style jacket, overcoat that she said that her father had worn to Dealey Plaza on the 22nd of November. And there's a photograph. I can't remember who took the photograph, but there's like a shadowy figure, maybe halfway between the picket fence and the book depository, taken seconds after the assassination of a figure, kind of leaving the scene.
Yeah.
And she felt that might have been her father. So what we tried to do was, my friend was, quite good with cameras and things. So we tried to recreate that photograph. She said I'm the same height as her father. So she let me wear the jacket, which was kind of a bit kind of spooky, really. But so I kind of stood in that area where that person was in the picture, tried to kind of have the same gait, etc. And my friend took the photograph, and then we tried to compare them both to see, does it, be the same person? Is it the height? Does the height match? All that type of thing. And it did seem to. I mean, it wasn't that scientific an experiment we did. It was quite basic, but nonetheless, we did do it. So, yeah, I mean, it is an interesting story, and I think she's got more to reveal. I think she's only kind of scratched the surface a little bit.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I tell you who I didn't mention in my who's who of Johnny Come Latelys. How about James Files? What's your position on him?
Before I get to Files, hey, Scott, is the photograph that you're talking about and that y'all recreated, is that the one that for years had been purported to be Jack Ruby?
I'm not sure, Chris. That's the first I've heard. That's the first I've heard of that. But it's impossible to make out at all who the person is. I mean, they're just a kind of an outline. I mean, it is definitely a person. It's not one of these pictures where it could be like shadows and things like that. They're at the kind of pergola area, and they seem to be walking away from the picket fence towards the book depository. But I've not heard that it's Jack Ruby, but it would be impossible to tell who it was.
I think it's the photograph, Scott, if I recall correctly. The not the pergola behind the Zapruder, but the other pergola, and then beyond it, behind the retaining wall, running parallel to the Elm Street extension.
Yeah, that would be right. Yeah.
So if you know where the photo of allegedly Lansdale is, if you cross the street to the retaining wall that runs parallel to the extension, it's that shadowy figure, isn't it?
Yeah, the person's taking the picture from the kind of the island, the island in the middle of Elm Street.
Yeah, infield.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So James Files. I mean, I don't know if you know, Chris, but Scott and I and Ruth Ann and Chana went to that. We went to a. Oh God, I don't know how to describe it, Scott. Really, we went to a meeting / presentation at a hotel on wherever it was, Maine, I think. And it was a very weird experience, wasn't it, Scott?
It certainly was, yeah.
What's your view on this?
Speaking from a strictly law enforcement, former law enforcement point of view, when you have a prisoner in jail and you start taking away their freedoms even more, their you just take away their stuff, they're going to start giving you something to get those freedoms back. Well, he gave the Kennedy assassination, and there's no way, there's absolutely no way that anybody, I don't care if it's the mob, I don't care if it's the government, I don't care who it is, there's no way that they're going to entrust killing the president, the most important man on the planet, to a 17-year-old kid. Okay. So I find that very, very hard to believe that they would do that. So
I think that's fair enough. I also wonder why he wasn't arrested when he was in Dallas.
exactly.
Given the fact that it's presumably still an outstanding case. And,
I mean, there's no statute of limitations on murder. So,
exactly. But yeah, as I say, it's something I felt we had to.
of course, yeah.
Half of our group didn't want to go. Johnny Cairns was very vociferous in that respect. But Scott and I, we kind of thought, look, let's just hear it out. Brooks, you've got your hand raised. Can you ask your question?
I just wanted to double back and make two quick comments on Garrison's files, and I wish I could cite the book. But yeah, he was ordered by Connick Sr. to somebody on his staff was ordered to destroy those files, and instead of doing it, they were preserved. I wish I could cite the book that came out of. I don't know if that strikes a chord with anybody or not, but I just wanted to make that comment. Also on the alteration of the Zapruder film as it relates to Walt Disney. There was a plant up in Rochester, New York, run by Kodak. It was called Hawkeye Works. And they did a lot of covert stuff for the government, for the intelligence agencies, and apparently had a role in the forget those boards, what they refer to those as when they were doing the mock-up of what the photos of the assassination looked like, the takeoffs from the Z frames. But anyway, Hawkeye had amazing capability. And so if you were going to alter the film, I'll just leave it at this. We have such a divided camp over the alteration of the Zapruder film, but there are very suspicious and rather unique flaws in some of those frames that you just have to scratch your head at. But Chris made a very good point, because I've gone back to the Much More and the Bronson and the Nix films, and do takeoffs, and you start to correlate one film to another. They would have to basically alter all of those films. Did they? Were they capable of doing it? What kind of a lift would that have been? Huge undertaking. We'll just leave it at that. We have a divided camp over that.
Brooks, very valid point, and I knew about the plant up in New York. I don't know specifics about it, so thank you for that. Also, you're right. There is, and not just here, but in the research community in general, there is a very divided camp on the film alterations. I am not a film expert. Yes, I work now as a paramedic on film and TV sets, so I understand a little bit more now. But I don't have the knowledge or the understanding, for that. These are, when I say that it's not altered, these are my personal views, and you would have to alter all the other films, and I don't see any with my layman's eyes, I don't see any evidence of alterations in any of the other films. So, but I do appreciate the question.
I might have Larry Rivera as a guest, and that would be, you know which camp he is in. So we shall see, because I think that could be quite interesting and controversial. Joe, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was there in New Orleans in 1995 when the review board had held a public hearing. And if you ever seen the video of it, I'm sitting right behind the witnesses. And Harry Connick lied. And then shortly after, about the destruction of the Garrison records, he blamed Garrison staff for pilfering them and taking them as they left after he won. Connick won the election, defeating Jim Garrison, and Harry Connick Sr. was the DA for decades. And then somebody who was a Garrison staffer saw that on TV, saw that Connick was lying, and he was ordered by Connick to destroy the grand jury records for Orleans Parish. And secretly, he kept them for years, and then he just mailed them to the review board. There was a big legal battle, and the review board won and Connick lost. So a lot of the Garrison stuff, just go on the Mary Farrell Foundation. You'll find those grand jury transcripts today. And I explained most of that in the Substack article in the link that I put into the chat.
Okay, that's
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
You.
I appreciate that. Look that up. Welcome back, Johnny. You just missed the James Files discussion.
Oh, damn.
Scott, do you still have your hand raised?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back and mention something again about it. So Johnny hasn't really missed the James Files. If it's okay to just mention one more thing about that talk we were at, because I went along. I'm just interested in the whole case. Whether it's James Files, Judy Baker, whoever. If they're in town and I'm in Dallas, I'm going to go along and see what I can find out. So I'm kind of open-minded about all of it. But one of the things that really got me at the Files talk in Dallas was not only is he supposed to have shot JFK, but he was actually there when Che Guevara was killed in Bolivia in 1967. And they put up this photograph, and it's a very famous photograph of Che Guevara, after he'd been captured, and there's like three people, unknown people in the picture with him. And they started to tell us that one of those individuals was James Files. And that for me, that I looked into, I did a bit of reading years ago about Che Guevara and things like that. And that's when I really started to think, it's one thing, you're going on about JFK, but now suddenly Files is there when Che Guevara is killed in Bolivia. They made a lot of reference to Felix Rodriguez, who was a CIA agent. And my memory might be wrong on this, but they seem to be hinting that it was Rodriguez that killed Che Guevara, and that isn't true. It was a Bolivian officer called Mario Terán who actually it may have been Rodriguez that gave the order. But so sometimes it just kind of stretches credibility. You're just trying to get your head round, was James Files involved in the Kennedy assassination? And then suddenly you're presented with a picture that he may have been present when Che Guevara was shot. And that just sometimes it starts to stretch credibility. It's just maybe just a bit too much.
Yeah, I thought when I quizzed him on Tippett and Gary Marlowe, I thought he was very weak on that, Scott.
Yeah, all of these kind of go back to, when I first started this, Gary did say, and he still says today, that, everybody has a story. Okay. It's up to you whether you follow the evidence or follow the story. And so I'm kind of like Scott. I'll listen to all of the stories and listen to all the theories and things like that. And I'm not ever one to say, oh well, you're full of crap, and I don't 100% don't believe that, because I think in any story you can pick out aspects either that make you believe it or that make you not believe it. And so I think it's important to listen to the different stories and things like that out there, whether whether you believe them or you don't, but that's 100% for you to decide yourself.
Yeah, I mean it's a nice link again. I mean, I mentioned much earlier on the the Roscoe White thing is gathering a bit of momentum and steam. You've got the book coming out and it's just been released in the States. It's on Amazon. Scott and I are waiting for our editions. I think there's a lot of very interesting bits and pieces that are coming together on this story. What's your core position on this now?
Everybody thinks that they know the Roscoe White story since it dropped in the early 90s. Everybody thinks that they know who Roscoe White was, what Roscoe White did. I'm going to tell you from having already read the manuscript, you don't know Roscoe White. You don't know the Roscoe White story. This is going to give credence to a lot of things that have been so easily dismissed by the naysayers and the quote unquote debunkers. This is going to debunk the debunkers, basically. I 100% believe the Roscoe White story. I've been around it since it first broke. I remember, the press conference and all of that. And Gary has spent years and decades on this. This is the one case that he may go on to something else, but he'll always come back to this type thing. So not trying to sell books, because I had nothing to do with the book. I mean, I helped interpret some of the medical records and things like that, but not trying to sell the books, but buy the book, read the book. You will be blown away at the new information that is in the book. And I think this is going to bring the Roscoe White story back into the forefront in a totally different light than what it's ever been shown in before. Because this is Roscoe's story as told by Ricky White, his son. Gary and Brian just kind of helped fill in the blanks, so to speak. But this is 100% Ricky White's story about his daddy.
Yeah. No, there's some very interesting stuff that's already come together from what I've seen with Brian gave us a sort of a soupçon at one of the Project JFK monthly Zooms. Brian obviously was at your symposium. I got a chance to speak to Gary afterwards. I mean, I haven't, I've picked up quite a lot of things over the years. So I asked you about Haggis. But if there's even more meat on the bones, that's great. I think it'll be a good book. One thing I wanted to ask you about that actually is the the witness elimination book. Is that handwriting been validated? Do you know? As Roscoe.
As far as, do we know if it's Roscoe's?
Exactly, yes. Do you know if there's been any work done on that? Because obviously that's been the big thing, hasn't it, with Albarelli and Lafitte, the diary,
Yes.
A lot of people really questioning the authentication of that work. There was something done in London, and I don't know where we are on that now in terms of of whether that has been validated properly or not. But by the same token, you'd hope that the White book has been validated.
I know that both Ricky and Geneva have said that it was Roscoe's handwriting. But as far as any handwriting expert or anything like that, I don't know if Gary ever sent it off or has plans to send it off or whatever. So
I'm just forecasting.
oh yeah. No, I mean, and trust me,
potential backlash.
They're already kind of gearing up for the not potential backlash, but for the backlash that will come. I will say this: in the book, for the very first time, you will see the Green Book or the Witness Elimination Book, page by page.
Yeah,
they have scanned it and printed it in the book for the very first time.
well, that's great, because I think we saw some slides, didn't we, in 22 at your symposium?
Yes.
No, that's
Was the Roscoe White angle ever seriously investigated by like the Dallas police, FBI?
No, they dismissed it as a complete joke. If you want to see, and it really wasn't an investigation, it was a news team investigation, but it's on YouTube. It's called the West Texas Connection. I would highly suggest watching that. But as far as being investigated by the government or Dallas PD or anybody like that, no, nobody took it seriously.
Because the case is still an open homicide, is that correct?
Yeah, it's still an open homicide, and there's no statute of limitation on murder.
Okay. So theoretically, if the book presents strong evidence that it was Roscoe White that killed John Kennedy, presumably Oswald's family could use it as some sort of kind of starting point to try and get their father's name cleared.
Wait a minute. Did you just use the word ethically and the JFK assassination together?
Yeah, well, yeah, I know. I know it's pretty naive, but
I mean, but no, Johnny, you're absolutely right. I mean, they definitely can, or they definitely could, but there are other books out there that make very strong cases against their dad doing this. So whether they will or not, last time I spoke with the girls, they kind of like Marina, they just kind of they're done with it, they're over it, and they've washed their hands of it, so to speak.
Which is a very peculiar standpoint, because I can imagine the girls are still suffering from the stigma of the assassination and who their dad is. So the only way, in my view, to kind of get out of that is to try and clear his name. And there's evidence out there.
I agree with that. Both the girls are married. They don't and haven't had the Oswald name for a long time, because my understanding is Kenneth Porter adopted them shortly after he married Marina, so they took the Porter name. So unless you know who they are, you really don't know who they are. And I promise you, they don't go around saying, "Oh yeah, but my dad is," So
yeah,
in the same class. Well, that's kind of crazy, isn't it, Chris?
Yes, Scott, they did. Yeah, no, I agree, Neil. I mean,
do you think there's any chance of Marina, because obviously Marina's getting older now, and do you think there's any chance of Marina just coming clean and just going, you know what, I never did take the backyard photographs. The thing on Walker was just a fabrication because I was getting pressured into doing it. I know it's fanciful, but I was speaking to Neil about this the other day. Marina Oswald really is probably only the really last ones left that actually still holds the keys to this thing, as far as Oswald goes.
Yeah, but no, Marina, she's 100% done talking about this.
They had a very volatile relationship,
Oh yeah,
Marina.
she said that. Go ahead.
No, I was, because I've been reading quite a bit of testimony recently, like the Demorne Shields and this guy J.H. Martin, who was kind of employed to kind of better Marina's image after the assassination. But apparently, like, yeah, Lee used to hit Marina, which is deplorable. Of course it is. Marina used to hit him as well. And Marina also, like, would basically, like, say that he was inadequate in front of people he didn't know, but like mental abuse almost, saying that he wasn't good enough and all this kind of stuff. And that aspect of that relationship or that abuse is never really talked about.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, there were problems on both sides in that marriage. You know, she gave as good as she got, and I think Lee did the same. I think Lee gave as good as he got. You know, but you gotta preface this by saying it's not right, but you've got to remember that at that time, especially in Texas, that women were seen and not heard, basically. You know, you were supposed to be the good Southern woman who cooked dinner and waited on your husband, and that's not who Marina was. That's not who a lot of Southern women were at the time. Obviously now that has changed, but that's kind of the way the culture was back then. So it's never, you're right, it's never really been talked about. You know, the movie JFK kind of alludes to it, and there's other documentaries that kind of have alluded to it. But as far as Marina coming out and setting the record straight, so to speak, last time I spoke with her, she said that there's nothing for her to gain by talking about it, and there's only pain and heartbreak, and she's done with it, and she's never going to talk about it again.
Which is unfortunate, because there's a lot that she could clarify.
Oh, I agree.
Like, because like the Walker case, for example, and Scott knows this better than most, it's basically her testimony that the Dallas police and the Warren Commission relied on to basically lump the Walker case at his feet, obviously post-mortem. So yeah, I just think, obviously, because she may be getting older, there's a slim chance, but because she could clarify. I mean, I don't know if you've read the testimony. Her testimony's all over the place. And I think that's obviously because the woman was frightened of being deported, etc.
Oh, yeah.
But actually reading it to gain any sort of truth from that, it's impossible.
Yeah, I understand, but like I said, the chances of getting her to talk, they're slim to none.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna have to feed. I'm gonna have to feed my dog shortly. I've got a couple of questions which are really easy for you to answer, Chris. But I just wanted to open it up one final chance, time to the floor to see if anybody else.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
Go on, Nancy.
Okay, well, it's not so much a question as a comment for what we were just talking about. One thing that I've found in my decades of research is, whether I'm reading written testimony or I've talked to women directly, that whole attitude of the women didn't have that much information to share is just so pervasive with everything. And you kind of, in talking about the relationship with Lee and Marina, Jean de Mohrenschildt even testified that, well, there's times when a woman should be smacked around a little bit if she talks back to her husband. And that's in her Warren Commission testimony. And it's like, are you kidding me? especially this is from a woman who was self-made as a fashion designer, had traveled around the world, had had every opportunity to live at a level equal to what men were living to at the time. For her to make a statement like that is very pervasive in that Texas environment. And so you have a lot of women that like weren't called. Like why weren't, Sandra Stiles wasn't called, but Vicki Adams was. Certain people weren't called to corroborate other people. They talked at length to Bill Newman, but they didn't have much use for Gail Newman. Well, I'm sorry, she's got two pair of eyes and she was standing right next to her husband, one of the closest ones to the car. So a lot of situations like that. About 25 years ago, I started toying with the idea of a book project, and I titled it at the time, Remember the Ladies, because I wanted to start going through these ladies and just start digging out their stories, etc. And I got through about 25 women, and boy, I pitched that thing around to publishers like crazy and couldn't get anything going. That may have just been my own problem with not presenting it correctly or my writing style or whatever. But I really wanted to get that word out there. So when a book like The Girl on the Stairs came out with Barry, going into such detail about Vicki Adams, it got me kind of reinvigorated in this line of thinking again. And at my age, I have to stop jumping around from thing to thing because I'm like, you show me a shiny new object and it'll start getting my interest again in something I haven't looked at for 5-10 years. And then I'm off and running again. And I know I have fewer years left than I have already witnessed on this earth, because I don't think you can call 72 years old middle age anymore. So I think that, I want to get focused back on these women. And, but even as I say that, I hear Michael Payne calling me, and I hear some other areas that I want to get into. But this whole attitude about the women, I think, is something that, and to a certain extent, it's also gone into the female researchers over time in terms of giving them their due. You have some of the bigger names that did make names for themselves, but there's a lot of women that did a lot of work on this. Okay, that's my soapbox.
No, Nancy, I appreciate that, and I agree with you on that. If I can help you with that research and getting that book published, I am good friends with Michael Marcades with Pinnell Publishing, who's doing Gary's new book, that I would be more than happy to pitch that to him.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Sure.
Nancy, in my opinion, a woman wrote the best book on this case, which was Accessories After the Fact. It's just that I keep on going back to that book because it's the best
Isn't
book
that
ever written.
amazing? I mean, and she was a meticulous researcher too. But you'll read a lot. You go to the Harold Weisberg archives, and you will see a number of these internal personal letters that were going back and forth of, I didn't like what Sylvia said, so piss on her, and that type of stuff. And everything got so personal all the time between researchers, and it still happens today. I think that it's very challenging in the research community. It always has been, because there's the egos get involved, etc. And people, God bless them, they're spending their own money, time, and resources to do this research and investigate this open case, which should have been done by the government. I mean, I can't think of any other murder case in U.S. history that so many people have confessed to participating in that have never been prosecuted. Okay,
I agree.
The only prosecution we've had is Garrison, and unfortunately, in my opinion, it got derailed. Partly by the CIA and partly by his own path that he decided to take on it, that some of the really good stuff in there got waylaid on the side. But I think that that's just amazing, and that's very telling about our government bureaucracy and apparatus, that no jurisdiction is willing to take that on.
I agree. I agree 100%.
Boy, I'm sounding pretty preachy today. I better stop.
Hey, I mean,
Get off your soapbox, Nancy.
Preach on, Nancy, preach on.
And Nancy, I
Just
listened to your interview on Out the Blank, and it was very good. It was really good. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was about I must have listened to it about a month ago or something like that. It was really, really good. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, well, great. I think Robbie Robinson is really into something with what he's trying to capture for, he's only in his 20s, and he only started into this within the last 2 years. I cannot believe how much that young man has grasped the situation and how much he can, bring to mind right away from, he's been reading books and articles and magazines and videos and everything. But he has the idea about how to tap into the 20-somethings and the 30-somethings. And when I wrote that essay for the 60th anniversary about the new generation and the younger people, it was really, I was thinking about Robbie, because he's one of my, he said that he considered me a mentor now. And it's like, all right, I found my person. Now everybody else go out and get your under 30-year-old to pass the torch on to, and that. But he's doing a great job with that Out of the Blank in terms of attracting people to get on the record with talking to him. And he doesn't just boom questions at you. He lets serendipity kind of take its course.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Nancy, if I could just make a couple of comments. There's an even younger generation emerging. And I can't remember the name of the kid, but he's 15 and he's got a YouTube channel called JFKA Theorist.
Alex Harris.
Sorry?
Alex Harris.
I mean, that's great stuff, Chris, that this guy is, I mean, his output is fantastic, and he's only 15.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that you look that up on YouTube. Just on the publishing front, Nancy, I was talking to Larry Hancock, emailing Larry Hancock last week, and he's been doing a lot of work on Oswald, which is sort of contrary to the sort of normal conspiracy mainstream view of Oswald and his activities. And he did a talk for us in Canterbury last year, and he's got a 150-page monograph going at the moment on Oswald. He's done a lot of work with David Boylan, of course, and he's looking for a publisher.
Okay.
His network. I mean, I mentioned, Johnny obviously has published recently with Dave O'Brien, and Bart has published, but I think that was self-published. Jim DiEugenio and Paul Blow have done the Chokeholds. I know they struggled with their publisher because Paul was reaching out to me at the death there. They thought it might trip over. But obviously you got this business going now and doing the Gary and Brian book. I don't know whether you want to reach out to Larry Hancock. Do you know Larry? Presumably you do.
I do, yes.
Yeah, I mean, just, make contact with him. Maybe if you can introduce him to Michael and help.
Okay. Yeah, it'd be great. Michael does not have a problem supporting the community. I mean, obviously, because of who his mom was, and he believes that the information needs to get out there.
Yeah. So again, so maybe Nancy, you can help Nancy as well. Brooks, do you still have a question?
Just a snide remark.
We like those.
I think Johnny was spot on. Great observations about Marina. But Ruth Payne had as much to do with incriminating Oswald in all of this. And, I kind of look at Marina's silence and I wonder if Ruth left the planet, if Marina might ever come forward and feel willing to talk. But with the specter of Ruth Payne hanging over her at this point, you just don't know. But anyway.
Well, we went to this Ruth Payne talk, half a dozen of us, at the Irving Arts Centre when we were in Dallas. Brooks, you'd already gone home. You were ill and gone home. And my word, what a waste of 62.
Yeah.
Johnny has just written a very interesting article which will appear on Kennedy's and King, which is all about that evening and rebutting a lot of the crap that came out of her mouth and the guy, I can't remember the moderator's name.
Mallon, Thomas Mallon.
Mallon, that's right. Yeah, Thomas Mallon. So look out for that, guys. Johnny's put a lot of work into that.
It was quite funny you should say that, because I never put this in the article, but she said something, and you can watch it on YouTube. The whole talk's on YouTube. It's an hour long. And there was a question and answering segment at the end. And one of the questions was, are you still in touch with Marina? And she says, no, she wasn't in touch with Marina. But she made this very telling comment. She said, but there's people in here, meaning in the audience that night, that check the internet and keep me up to date with these things. And I thought, what a strange comment to make. So you've got people like checking on like June and Rachel and what they're up to. I find that very weird. Very strange.
Not surprising.
Okay, so I'm going to leave you with some very easy questions, Chris, just to finish it off, and then we can go away and do our own thing. Did you meet any of the more abrasive members of the research community, the more assertive people like Livingston and Weisberg? Any of these characters?
I never met Livingston or Weisberg. I mean, you always meet opinionated, I'm right, you're wrong. And if you disagree with them, then they're going to jump down your throat type people. So, it's, you just kind of got to kind of take it with a grain of salt. But as far as like the more abrasive ones that we, hear about, Livingston or even David Lifton or, people like that. No, I never got a chance to meet them. I did talk to Lifton on a couple of occasions, but didn't really ever meet him or get to know him.
Yep. Okay. Fair enough. So out of all the people that you met, and I know one of the answers, I think, who are your top three, your three favorite researchers?
Aside from Gary?
Well, you can include Gary, or you can give me four.
I'll give you four. I mean, because Gary's a given. He really is. I would honestly have to go with Penn Jones. Penn Jones really kind of started that grassroots effort. Especially here in Texas, being kind of the epicenter of it. So I would have to definitely put Penn on that group. I would also put Larry Ray Harris with his work that he was doing on the Tippit murder before he passed. I wish we knew or could get a hold of his research, but no one seems to know where it's at or who has it or if it's even still around. And then probably modern day, man, that's kind of a toss up. There's so many modern day ones. Barry Ernest has done some really good stuff. Gosh, yeah. I mean, a lot of
too difficult a question. Okay.
I mean, it's hard to pick. I mean, it's hard to pick, one or two. I mean, Jim Mars. Jim Mars is probably one of my absolute favorite human beings. You know, when he walked the earth. I mean, he was a very prolific writer, and he was a bulldog when it came to researching stuff. So you know, probably him. You know, Robert Groden can be added to the list. You know, it's just, I mean, for me, the list is endless. It's hard to pick, you know, 3 or 4, but my top one will be and has always been Gary.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, look, what about leaving it with your top 3 books? And I don't mean mainstream books. I don't mean, you know, I don't mean Jim Mars. I don't mean Mark Lane, Rush to Judgment, whatever. Your 3 favorite books that perhaps give us a different perspective on this. Bearing in mind you've probably read everything.
What's that you're holding up, Johnny? I can't hardly see that one.
It's not Bugliosi, I know that.
Yeah, no. Probably anything by Joaquin Yostin. You know, particularly his Marina Oswald book. Great book. I think the 4-volume set by Paris Flamode that he did. If you can find those, are very, very hard to find. But if you can find those, I would highly suggest those. Probably favorite. And then I know you said not mainstream. Henry Hertz, Reasonable Doubt. One of the first books I ever read on assassination. When I first met Gary, he gave me 2 books. He gave me Cover Up, which is his and Larry Ray's, and then he gave me Reasonable Doubt. So those would probably be my 3, along with Cover Up. I mean, those would be the ones that I would tell people that, you know, if you want non-mainstream, then look at these.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, and the final question is probably the easiest one. Who killed JFK?
Man, it's easier to answer who didn't kill JFK. You know, I can tell you that Oswald.
It's a hell of a Venn diagram, isn't it, Chris?
Right. Yeah. Pretty much. I can tell you that Oswald, even as late as the 80s, you know, they dug him up and he still hadn't fired a shot. Wow.
Oh, great stuff. All right. Well, look, I think we and it's you know, at least an hour more than I thought it would be.
Right.
Brilliant.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you know what we're like.
Oh yeah. No, this has been great. I appreciate it. You know, folks, I really do. I appreciate y'all having me on. Ryan put my email address in the chat, so please feel free to, you know, any questions or anything, contact me with that. Also, if you're on Facebook, JFK, the Continuing Inquiry, that's my Facebook page. I'd love to have you guys join. But other than that, it's pretty much all I got. I appreciate being here, guys.
Well, it's been very entertaining, fascinating stuff, Chris, and I do hope to have you back, perhaps to do something a bit more formal, but some really great stories and anecdotes. And I mean, I could talk to you all night, and it was great to see you again in Dallas, of course. And,
yes, sir.
You know, great stuff. And yeah, take care and give our love to Sharon.
I will. Thank y'all very much. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Sir.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, guys.